Sampling is the cornerstone of hip-hop music, but some producers shy away from it because of its limitations. Today I'm going to be reacting to a video by Navie D called How to Sample Everything and giving my perspective. That way you walk away with double the value. Without further ado, let's get into it.
You ever find that perfect sample, but as soon as you try turning it into a full beat, you hit a wall? It's hard figuring out what else your beat needs when you use a sample, but once you know what role your sample is playing, you'll be able to sample anything and still make a full beat out of it. So if you want to start making more finished beats, I'm going to share my simple 4-role framework that will give you the power to sample anything and still make a complete beat out of it. So let's talk about how to use this sampling framework. Every sample you use can fill one of 4 key roles for your beat. And by using this approach, it will become easy to know exactly what your sample is doing, but more importantly, what else your beat needs to become an actual full beat. So let's break down these roles one by one. One role that a sample can play is to be your beat's star. This is when your sample is the main idea or sound that makes the beat special, that helps the beat stand out. It's what everyone pays attention to and remembers about your beat. So here's an example of a star sample. Take a listen to this sample here.
I must relax you, I mean totally relax you.
This is a Barry White sample that was famously used for 50 Cent's 21 Questions.
Would you love me if I was down and out? Would you still have love for me?
When you listen to this beat, the sample is what catches your attention. The entire beat would sound plain and boring if the sample was not in the beat, and it's just what makes the beat special. So that's one type of role your sample can play.
A little more about the star technique that he mentioned. You know, it's really cool to find a sample whenever you're at the record store, or if you're sample chomping online and you just hear just such unique sounds or such unique instruments. You just know this is going to make the beat shine because it's so different. Something about that is so appealing and it just gets my energy going. And once you get that feeling, you definitely want to lock it in. Don't do too much. Just save it, put it aside, and make sure you don't forget about it. Also, if you do come across the sample that he's referencing as the star, always know that you can add some supporting elements to it to help it not sound so repetitive. So one thing I like to do is in a lot of samples that just really totally make up the composition, I like adding things like strings, extra pianos, even sometimes extra synths, extra pads, and even making it sound a bit like it's supposed to be there in the music, as if the original composers added it in. So I'll like shelf the EQ, take off some of the top end, so that way it sounds a little bit dirtier. As a matter of fact, I actually have an FL Studio Patcher plugin called FL Magic that has a lot of great features that could help you accomplish this in FL Studio. So make sure you take a look at the description, check out FL Magic and use it for your beats because it's going to help you get that same texture and tone as the different samples that you come across. So you can use that as well.
But this leads me to the next role. Not every sample should be used to catch your listener's attention. There are some samples that instead are more helpful to get your beat to feel more complete and more full. And here's an example of a sample like this. Here we have this Lobby Cipher sample.
And I wonder if you know what it means.
Which was used in Kanye West's I Wonder.
My whole life.
In this beat, you could say the bright synth is the star. It's the sound in this beat that catches your attention, and it's probably what everyone hums along to when they hear this song. But the sample is still important. It has a supporting role in this beat. It's what makes it actually sound full. If the sample didn't exist, there would still be some cool, unique ideas in this beat, but the beat would probably just sound incomplete. So that's the second type of role a sample can play, to be the supporting role for your beat.
And also for these type of samples that Kanye West used, a lot of those samples were replayed by people like Ken Lewis. You can find a lot of interviews by Ken Lewis online. As a matter of fact, Ken Lewis is actually one of the first courses that I've ever purchased, period, when it comes to music. He had an online audio engineering school. I bought that way back in the day. So shout out to Ken Lewis for being one of the trailblazers in the space with very, very valuable courses. As far as the sample when it comes to Kanye's compositions, that goes to show that you can find a sample, that you can also have friends or family members or relatives, people you just know locally, actually replay the sample. Maybe you guys can get just fatter, juicier, more modern sounds by using the modern tools we have, the modern EQs and effects, and you just have so much more control over each individual sound, and you can even play with the chord progression a little bit. So you have more flexibility if you do happen to come across someone who can play multiple instruments, and you guys can replay the sample. And then also that gives you a little bit more flexibility when it comes to sample clearances. So, you know, if you find a sample that you like, of course, you can work with it as is. You can also have someone replay it. That way you can make it a little bit more customized to your particular taste.
The third type of roll creates a sense of pacing for your beat. It directs what the tempo is and establishes a rhythm. But to put it more plainly, it's the drums. And there are plenty of examples of these types of samples used throughout history, like the drums from this Queen song here, used for Jay Dilla's Make 'Em Envy. This roll is simple to understand. Without drums and a beat, it can be hard to guide your listener and getting them to understand what the pace of the beat is. And so this is the third type of roll a sample can play in your beat, to be the director.
Man, there's so much that you can do with the drums when it comes to sampling. One thing that I like to do is I like to have those sampled drum breaks or sampled drum loops from older school records, and then just stack on top of it my own modern drums with the extra punch and the extra snap on the snare and just the extra modern aggressiveness. And sometimes I'll even, you know, take off some of the different frequency ranges in the sampled drums and just allow mine to shine. So we have a mix of old school character with modern punch and modern snap. So that way it's really hitting the speakers the way that we want it to these days. It's not super nostalgic. We got character, but we also have that aggression and punch that so many of us look for. Also, if you come across sampled drums, you can still chop them up. You find a nice little snare, sample that snare and just put it in your folder. You find a kick, sample that kick, put it in the folder. You know, you don't have to use it as is. Play with the pitch, stack your drums on top of it, put effects on it, see what kind of different things you can get by manipulating what's already there. So, you know, you can of course use the break beat as is from the older school record, but of course you can still use modern technology to really get things the way that you want it to.
A sample isn't limited to just playing one roll. There are plenty of examples of some samples playing multiple rolls all at once. For example, we have this sample from the Charmels. As you can hear, this sample is able to play multiple rolls for a beat, which is exactly how the RZA used it for Cream.
The combination made my eyes bleed. No question, I will flow off and try to get the dough off. Sticking up right, boys on board.
Now, in case this is starting to feel a bit hard to understand, I'm going to walk through some examples of how to use this framework to make full beats from scratch using samples. But before we do that, let's cover the last roll. So what is this mysterious final roll? Well, the same way when you watch a movie or a play, what's happening in the background can add more detail or set a mood for everything else that's happening. And a sample can be used in the exact same way. These types of samples are specifically used to introduce personality and add more richness into the beat. For example, when you listen to the sample here from SD Burman, you can hear this gets used as a background detail for Put You On The Game, produced by Timbaland. By no means would this beat sound boring or incomplete or aimless without this sample, but it definitely does add some character.
You know, I like to call that ear candy. You know, whenever you're listening to a sample and it's just that one little piece, and to me, like he mentioned, it's usually like a vocal sample that, you know, just it does something weird. It's just crazy. It just catches the listener's ear. That's why I like to say sampling is not just one thing. If you do hear like just a weird percussion sound that you can take and drag and drop into your folder, you can hear that a vocal sample like that. You can hear like a synth sound, and you may not be able to make a full beat out of that particular synth sound or anything like that. Just save it. You never know when it can fit in the background, in the tuck of a beat, and then just work as something that's ear candy that not too many producers can find in modern VSTs. You know, whenever we're sampling, we're just going to different places and spaces and time and groups of people and cultures and geographies. And that's a beautiful thing about sampling. We're taking a piece of music, a piece of people's energy, putting it into our own compositions and making it our own. It's a beautiful thing. So don't always feel it has to be one way. It has to be a 4-bar loop or an 8-bar loop. Sometimes it's just little pieces that work as ear candy that you place in your beat, and it turns into magic.
The star, the support, the director, or the background extra. And to make this easier to understand, let's use this framework to make a couple of beats from scratch. Let's start by taking this random sample here. When we listen through this sample, we can hear that this has the ability to play multiple roles in the beat if we wanted it to, like if we use this piece here. This has tons going on and could be used to play more than one role. But let's say I chose to use a different section of the sample, this one here. See if you can tell which role this should play. Now to me, this would work great as the star of our beat. It's a guitar playing this melodic idea, but the idea stands out to me. It has this unique feel because of how the guitar is being played and how much emotion this creates for me personally. If I heard this in a beat, it would immediately catch my attention.
Now, with all the options that he just pointed out here in this particular sample, this is another point I want to highlight, that sampling, you can sample the same song multiple ways. So just because you sample a song one way doesn't mean that it's time to just totally throw it away. I understand sometimes when you're cooking up, you just want to focus in on one particular process, but don't think that you can't come back at another time and find other parts of the sample to use for your beat. For example, a lot of the times I like to use chopped up break beats. Sometimes I use it to give me one type of groove. Sometimes I use it to make another type of unorthodox groove. I kind of feel like I have my own little personal drummer whenever I'm working with break beats. So I never really know what might work with what until I actually do it. So that's part of the fun and flexibility of sampling. So don't always feel like you have to do it one way. You know, you have to go start to finish one type of beat, one type of way. You can always come back, find another piece of that sample, cook up something totally different. You can make an Afro beat to this guitar piece. You can make a drill beat to this guitar piece. You know, there's a whole wide world of different things you could do. So it's not always, you know, I've already sampled that, set it and forget it. You can always come back and get more.
So let's use this as our star. As you can hear with this sample, there's still a lot that it doesn't provide. So this is when we move on to filling the remaining roles ourselves. So one role our beat definitely needs is some support. You could use more samples to fill each of these remaining roles if you'd like, or you can just do this yourself using VSTs. For this beat, I can grab this Fender Rhodes here, and I can use this for the supporting role in my beat. Now, obviously, when you do this, you don't want your supporting sound to do whatever it wants. It's there to support and follow what your star is doing. So to do that, let me start by seeing what notes are actually in this guitar sample. And to get this support to actually work with the sample, I'm going to use this like a blueprint to draw in some chords that follow what the sample is actually doing. So for the first bar here, we have this A note up here. Over here we have this E, so let's use this for our chord as well. And down here we have this A sharp. Then for the next bar, I want to use some different notes since I'm building a different chord. So we have this D here. I'll use this E again, but maybe I'll switch this for something else later on. And then down here we have a different note that I haven't used, this A sharp. So let's hear how this sounds. Alright, cool. So this works perfectly with my star sample, and I want to say, as you can hear, this pattern isn't blowing your socks off, it isn't catching your attention, but that's fine because it's not meant to, it's not the star. I'm simply adding this into my beat to get it to sound more full and support what the star is doing.
There we go. Like I mentioned earlier, whenever you have a sample, you can also add supporting sounds. So it's interesting that he decided to do this. And, I mentioned using pianos and things of that nature. So, producers who like to sample, we have a mental Rolodex of different tools and techniques to kind of break apart repetitiveness that can happen sometimes when you sample and you do sampled beats. I enjoy sampled beats. I enjoy making fully, originally composed beats. I like doing both. But, there's something cool about having the challenge of the restrictions of a sampled beat. There's only so far that you can go, and that forces you to be creative and kind of find little pockets and valleys that you can add in your own music to make things feel either fuller or break apart some of the repetitiveness.
So let's drag this into our Fender Rhodes and listen to how this sounds. Alright, I think this is sitting in the wrong frequency zone. We don't need it to sit this close to the guitar and be as bright as the star is. So let's push this down an octave and reduce its color. Alright, that just fits better. Just a quick side tip here, often, but not always, the supporting sounds in your beat will sit at a lower frequency zone than your main star. From here, I think getting these chords to strum would sound more pleasant. Alright, I think this E might sound better if it was at a lower octave. And I'll also take the root notes and copy and paste them at a lower octave as well, so this fills up even more space in these lower frequencies. Alright, this beat is now actually sounding more full, and it's all thanks to this supporting sound. Now, before I add more, it would be wise to bring in some direction to create some pacing for this beat, and that way I'll have a better sense of where to place my remaining sounds going forward as well. So let's add in some drums. Now let's see if we can add a little bit more uniqueness and personality into this beat by filling in that background role. So here I will grab yet another random sample. As you can hear, it's full of these wacky, bizarre textures, making it easy to imagine this working in a background role. So let's bring this into the beat. I want to point out I cut a lot of frequencies by using an EQ and added a lot of reverb and delay to get this sound to actually sit in the background.
Yes, if you're going to add these ear candy kind of sounds on top of the beat that you already have, you definitely want to find a way to blend it in. And in this case, I definitely do enjoy the EQing. Another thing you can do to kind of play games on the ear is you can sit the ear candy sample, you can sit it back, and you can also do a little bit of panning. You can pan things out the way when it hits, the ear candy hits, it could be a little bit left, like 25% left or 20% left. Then you can wait, and then when it hits again, you can do like 20 or 25% right. So that way the ear is hearing that little ear candy hit bounce from left to right, and it's can kind of have a cool effect. Or you can have it hit twice left, and then you can have it hit twice right. Different things. You just want to feel it out, play around with it in your DAW and see exactly what feels the best. So, of course, EQ, play with that, see how it fits in the beat. Like you mentioned, use different effects, but also panning is a definitely underutilized thing. So also make sure you try that out as well.
But even still, after doing this manipulation, this doesn't really feel like it fits in the beat, and you can hear it's pretty off key. So let's see exactly what's happening inside of the sample to fix this. You can see here the sample is playing at a G sharp. And when we compare this to our main star sample and look at the notes in there, there is not a G sharp in this sample at all. And the same is true for our support pattern, which could explain why this sample doesn't feel like it fits in. So let's repitch the sample to get it to fit. When looking at our pattern that we did build for our support, the root note here was an A sharp. So let's repitch this sample to this note. We will do this by bringing this down a bunch of semitones. So now it's playing at a C sharp, so a few more semitones down should do it. All right, now it is at an A sharp. So when we play this alongside our other layers in the beat, it works perfectly.
Okay, so I'm feeling the beat, but one thing is personally, I feel like that little ear candy piece that was added sounded better off key. Like I mentioned in my Heat Check Live beat review show that you guys can, of course, check out and submit to in the description, it's good to learn at least a little bit of music theory, get your ears tuned up so you can know what sounds good together. But then also after you learn the rules, quote unquote rules, you can know how to break the rules and do it in a musical and creative way. So that way you can make things sound ugly intentionally, ugly in a almost like poetic kind of way. And to me, the feel of the drums, the feel of the sample felt like gritty, New York. I'm getting like Benny the Butcher, Conway the Machine, Griselda kind of vibes. And having those off-key sounds that was originally there, to me just added to the texture and added to the aesthetic of the ultimate goal of this beat. So that decision, I would personally, my taste would say, leave it off key. Let's break the rules in this instance for this particular sound because it fits the end goal of what we're trying to do.
I think the last supporting sound this beat is still missing is a bass line. And so once we bring that in, we have ourselves a full beat. Pretty simple, straightforward example. Let's do one that's slightly more challenging next. Let's say, for example, I start with a sample like this. Now, when we listen through what's happening in this sample, tell me what role you think this part of the sample should play. Now to me, this sounds like a combination of roles. Most primarily it is the support, but there's a little bit of director being played here. It's mainly support because we have a pretty standard piano here that doesn't sound particularly unique or attention catching. Plus it's playing some pretty simple chords in a lower frequency zone. And when we listen to the sample, there's also some light bass in it as well. So this feels like it's more suited for a supporting role. And this sample is also somewhat filling the director role since it has a light layer of drums that is creating some sense of pacing. Having said that, it'll probably need a little bit more reinforcement for that role. So at this point, this beat still needs a star, it still needs some background, and probably some more help with direction. So let's start by filling in the star role. Let's do that by grabbing this guitar here. Now, this guitar doesn't sound particularly unique or interesting, which won't make for the best star if we use it as it is. And so this is when using effects can help. Now this sounds more unique. Next, let's build a pattern for this beat. Once again, let me take a look at what is happening in the sample. And I will use this like a blueprint to build a melodic pattern that would work perfectly as the star alongside my supporting sample. Let's try to follow what the sample is doing and build a pattern like this. So let's preview this and hear how it sounds. Let's shift some of these notes over. I'll also add in this extra note in between. So now let's take a listen. Alright, so this sounds like a good starting point. Let's hear how this would actually sound if it was my guitar playing this. So we'll drag this in. A bit too loud, so let's reduce the velocity here. And I think this F sharp here would be better as a different note. So let's see what the next note up is in our sample. Here we do see we have a G sharp in this sample. So let's shift this note up to G sharp and take a listen. I feel like I like this better. I do want to introduce a little more variation into the beat, and I can probably use this guitar to do that. So for example, what if I repeated this pattern for bar 2, but I changed the ending notes? Alright, I think this sounds great. Next, let's fill in the director role by adding some actual full sounding drums. And this time I can fill this role from grabbing yet another sample. I'll use this one here. Never knew I cared. So let's throw in these drums alongside some lighter drums of my own for layering purposes and hear how this sounds.
So far, I'm feeling like this particular beat didn't quite need those newer guitars on top of it. We could have just kept the sample as is and added some heavy drums with a whole lot of tone and a whole lot of character. I was getting like the Infamous by Mobb Deep kind of vibes from this beat. You could just have like some real chunky drums on top of it, and those guitars, we could like just go ahead and mute them, just because the vocalist is going to be the star of the show, especially in these type of beats. It's going to have a lot of space. And the reason I was able to kind of see certain things like this is actually being in the studio with recording artists. If you guys do decide to start recording and working with recording artists, you can see that these rappers, these singers don't need too many sounds in order for them to write their songs, you know, make the hooks, make the verse, make the intro. They really don't need too much there. So as you're cooking up as a producer, take some time to just, wait a minute, freestyle. You know, maybe it's an old whatever verse, Jay-Z verse, Young Jeezy verse. Just start rapping on it and like listen to your voice and listen to how it plays off of the music. Some people even go as far as actually getting acapellas to put on top to, you know, make sure they have enough space. But don't be afraid to do that, because you can start to find yourself adding sounds that don't need to be there. And then whenever recording artists actually get the beat, they could be thrown off energetically. Like maybe it starts off one way, and then as you get into the verse or as you get into the hook, it's just a little too many sounds going on, and that's going to cause them to actually pass up the beat that they would have usually selected. So, you know, whenever you find yourself in a scenario where you feel like, am I adding too many sounds, or is this enough sounds? Always go the route of having too few sounds than too many sounds. I know as a producer, we want to keep adding and adding and adding. I'm telling you firsthand, rappers, singers, they do not need that many sounds in order to inspire them to actually create and write a great song. So just always keep that in mind.
The sample is providing some support with the bass line. It just doesn't feel like it's strong enough. So I'll add in my own layer of bass as more support. And now finally, I will fill in the last role, which is the background. I'll grab this sound here. Once again, not really a sound that feels like it fits in the background role. It doesn't have much personality right now, and it feels like it's sitting up front. But this is exactly when effects can help again. Plus some unique pattern ideas like a slide will also help here. So that is the 4-roll framework that you can use to sample anything.
All right, that was a great video. What do you guys think? Are there any other sampling techniques that you possibly want to include that was missing from this video? Let me know in the comments. Or are you a producer who you just like to totally compose? You totally like to make 100% all you beats. And you know, if you are one of those producers, please let me know in the comments. I'll be glad to check that out and, you know, see where you're coming from. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you hit like and subscribe. I'm Desmond A, and I'll be back with more great videos. Peace.
Desmond.